Chris here, Green Sabre, episode 9. And this is one, I've been looking forward to this one for a while. Video games. Shameless tie-in. Well, I mean, not too shameless, because as I've mentioned on previous videos, the name Green Sabre comes from a video game. So video games are a big part of all of us, maybe least so Rossi, but I might be doing him a disservice there. But I know that me, Gaz, Bry, big video game nerds. So I wanted to do a kind of, not so much a countdown, but a kind of video game history of the band. Obviously, when I get sort of later on to the name, the Green Sabre name tie-in, I'll cover that again, which I've already covered anyway. But you know, just to cover ground, I'll do that again anyway. So yeah, video games. Let's get stuck in. First of all, though, this will be airing Monday or Tuesday, December, what day are we on? Monday will be the 5th, Tuesday will be the 6th. This will be airing one of those 2 days, hopefully the Monday, but anyway, I digress. We've got a gig on the Friday, Lancaster. I've mentioned it previously, but just in case any of you are in the Lancaster area, on the Friday, 9th of December, we're supporting Thanes and Thralls at the Bobbin, and I cannot wait. Really looking forward to it. Hopefully this so-called snowstorm or whatever it is isn't going to land just before I try and make my way over there from sunny Leeds. But yeah, can't wait for it. First gig in a while, last gig of 2022. But yeah, really excited about that. So yeah, that's the current band news out of the way. So let's crack on. Video games. Now, I've made notes because I like to fuck up on almost every video by missing out really important, key, detailed stuff. So I'm trying not to this time. So if I keep peering down, like so, it's to consult my notes. So let's just have a quick go through. So yeah, I've been a game nerd. So I feel like my generation was kind of like that first generation of video game nerd. Because they weren't really, I mean, they were a thing clearly, but they weren't really, let's put it this way, it was nowhere near the thing that it is now, with 1,000,001 different consoles and stuff like that. It was very much the kind of, the very embryonic stages of video gaming nerdship. So I started like most of us did back then. It was kind of those of you, us that were lucky enough to have home computers, and when I say home computers, they were those tiny little ZX Spectrums, ZX81. We even had a ZX81 at home. My dad went out and bought it. I don't think he had a fucking clue what he was doing with it for the most part. And nor did we, but it was, I remember you got like a cassette of that had like about 6,000 games on it that were all very similar kind of long rectangular block chases, small square-shaped block, and so on and so forth. That was about, they were fairly crude, let's put it this way, back then. But yeah, that was where this sort of gaming started. So we had a ZX81, which moved on to a ZX Spectrum. Do you remember the one with the rubber keys? For you oldies, like myself watching this, yeah. Moved on to one of them, but my friend had one of them. That was my first introduction to it, and he used to play like Manic Miner, Jet Set Willy, all those classic old Spectrum games. And I got hooked then as a kid. I'd go around to his after school, and we'd just, most of the time I'd be watching him try and complete like Jet Set Willy and so on. But I'd play a few things as well. And I got hooked once. That was kind of late primary school. Once we got to high school, I went to Morecambe High School. School. I don't know what it's called now. Probably Morecambe Bay Community fucking something or other. But yeah, Morecambe High School I went to. Me and my mates at lunch, we just used to go out onto the prom in Morecambe and all the slotties and the arcades and that kind of thing. And there was one, it was called, there was a few on the front. There was Johnny's, that's still there. There was Slater's and various other stuff. But there was one in particular that I remember called Bermudiana. It's not there now. I think it's a Chinese restaurant or something. Or hairdressers or something like that. But yeah, Bermudiana was the name of the arcade. And yeah, it had all your usual slotties and all that shite. But it had loads of the classic arcade consoles. Which were, I'm going to have to consult my notes. But the ones that I remember were Bubble Bobble, Double Dragon. I'm going to try some new. So while I just digress slightly, I'm trying some new stuff here with by trying to interject, because I've not, obviously the classical video games and some of the Spectrum and stuff, I've not got copies of. So I'm hoping to interject imagery in the bottom corner at some point. So yeah, Bubble Bobble, Double Dragon, Vigilante, notes, Shinobi. I remember a mate playing that with the extra level where he had to sort of throwing stars and all that nonsense. Space Harrier with the massive sort of console thing that you sat in. And I always remember as well that there was the Righteous Pigs album. It reminded me of the pictures that were on the side of the Space Harrier video game console. So little metal tie-in for you there. Stuff like that, yeah. And they had a game called Nemesis that was like a side-on space shooter, and you got like the little glowing nucleuses and stuff like that when you got power-ups and all that. I love that game, but the one I loved the most was its follow-up, Nemesis 2. Salamander, it was called. I think it had a different name in US or Japan or something, but we knew it as Salamander, and I fucking adored that game. That was the first one that sort of like every time I'd go there and I'd save up my 10p's to have a go on it. And it was one of, I think it was the only arcade console that I clocked. I managed to clock just the once. I had no audience at the time. You know, you watch these throwback things and there's always like kids crowding around. And I remember doing that, watching somebody else clock it. And I tried for ages, and that was the only one that I clocked. It was like, sort of like I say, side-on shooter, but it varied between levels, and some of it was top-down, some of it was side-on. Anyway, I'm getting bogged down in meaningless detail, and I'm just trying to gloss over the fact that we used to go to the arcades, and that's what hooked me into video games. And eventually, yeah, we got our own Spectrum at home. And those were the first games that I really got hooked. Now, there was a few that I wanted to mention. Yeah, I used to read a magazine, Crash Magazine, I think it was called, that was like specifically for the Spectrum. And I remember just poring over one particular one of it because I was going to get Platoon, the video game, with my birthday money. And they reviewed it in this Crash Magazine. And it got spectacular reviews. And I spent like a whole week just sort of, before I got the game, thinking, this is going to be amazing, this is going to be amazing. Finally got the game, and any of you that had a Spectrum will remember, they didn't look the most spectacular. Lots of colour bleed, and what colour you had, most of it was just like sort of one colour with like black outline in various things. And it didn't look great and stuff. I remember it being so hard. I got it, and I never got anywhere near it. It was really disappointing. I'd looked forward to this game for so long, and I was shite at it because it was so difficult to do. I've since seen walkthroughs of it on YouTube. If you're really fucking bored and you want something to do, have a look at that. But yeah, Platoon. But the one game that grabbed me, and it's still one of my favourite games ever, and I don't have I'm positive I've got an old cassette of it somewhere in Loft, but I had a look at weekend and couldn't find it anywhere. So sadly, I don't have it here. So what I'm going to do is interject image here of Target Renegade. You may remember the game Renegade, like a scrolling fighter. Well, they do like these daft kicks and stuff like that. Well, Target Renegade was the sequel. Now, I feel like Renegade might have been an arcade console game at first. The sequel, Target Renegade, wasn't. I could be wrong here, but I believe it was specifically for the home computer game market. So it come out, I had it on the Spectrum, of course, but a mate of mine had the Commodore and he had it on that. And yeah, it was specifically for that. And I loved it. I mean, you look back on it now, and again, that's another one that I've watched walkthroughs of on YouTube. And it looks really fucking crude, because it was. But it was just great. The first one, you were in like the subway and you were sort of scrolling alongside, and there's these guys with baseball bats. The second one, there's these, I think they're supposed to be ladies of the night, but these big sort of dumpy lasses that try to attack you with bike chains and whips and stuff like that. Fucking ace. And the other thing that I wanted to mention, the soundtrack to it, a classic 8-bit soundtrack, but the music was incredible. So anyone out there that has got like an MP3 of the Target Renegade original 8-bit music, hit me up. I fucking love it. And I'd love to hear it again. I've heard it on YouTube, of course, but I'd like my own sort of copy of it, really. But yeah, so that's me very briefly going into my early formative years, the arcade years, the Spectrum years. And then along came consoles, the Sega mainly. There was like the Mega Drive and the Master System. The Master System first, and then we moved on to the Mega Drive. But they were my first ones, really. I did forget one. Just consult. I thought I'd have a look at my notes. I remember a game on the Spectrum called Footballer of the Year, and it was my first. I'll probably cover it again in a bit later when I go on to the FIFA games and stuff, but it was my first experience of a football game on the Spectrum. It was really crude. I mean, basically, you just had a shot of like a goal with a goalie stood in it, and you like controlled a ball and moved it along the way and just had to sort of choose shoot. I've got very fond memories of this game because you'd do that like 2 or 3 goals per game, whoever you were playing, and it all looked exactly the same. None of the colours were different. And then it'd go to like a vidi printer, like the BBC used to have the vidi printer with the scores coming in. Yeah, I love that. And yeah, Paperboy, that was another one that I like to mention. Brian mentioned that. He loved Paperboy, and I remember having that on the Spectrum. And again, another classic arcade game, but I've spent too much time already, 10 minutes on that. So let's crack on with consoles. And the first consoles that I had now, the Sega was the first one that we had. And I remember clearly, like, I think we had a game called Operation Wolf that was one of the first-person shooters, which is going to go into this. I've got a Call of Duty here. I like these World at War ones that, like, go back, like, over the wars that were World War II and that kind of stuff. And I think the first Black Ops one that has you in the Nam, in the trenches of Da Nang or wherever it is, and so on. And yeah, but Operation Wolf was great. They all used to sort of sidle on at the side, like sort of come onto the side, and you'd just like have a target that you'd shoot them. And I love that. But I wanted to get in here at this point that I've never been a huge fan of first-person shooters. I played Doom for a bit. Some people's favourite game ever, Doom, and it is a great game, I have to say that. But yeah, I kind of avoid first-person shooters. There aren't many. There are a couple that get mentioned in it, but there aren't many that I really like. I prefer to have a character that you control. I'm not an enormous fan of first-person shooters. So although this is a great game and looks amazing, I don't tend to spend a lot of time on it. It's not one of them that I go back to. So yeah. The main things that I remember from the Sega were a game called, interject image here, California Games. I loved that. I wish that they'd redo it for like the PlayStation Classic Arcade series or something like that. Because barring me going out and buying a Sega Mega Drive, I won't get to play it again. And I really want to. It had like hacky sack on there, skateboarding on a half pipe. I think you roller skated along the beach or something like that. BMXing. It was great. And I've got fond memories of it as well, because we used to play it. Again, I've probably mentioned this on a previous video about the early days of my band life. And my old desolate guitarist Shooter, we used to go around his house and we'd play California Games for hours whilst listening to like Deicide and Malevolent Creation and Cathedral and Morbid Angel, and it was great. Yeah. So that probably is why I've got such fond memories of California Games. But a great game. Surfing as well. You did like the half pipe surfing. Other than that, Street Fighter 2. The first of the fighting games, maybe interject image here. But yeah, love Street Fighter 2. And still, it was one of them where I kind of felt that I never really mastered fighting games because they just felt like button mashing. That obviously you could get all the special moves and all that nonsense, like the Hadouken and all that fucking stuff. I felt that if you just button mashed, you could get away for most of it as well. So it didn't keep me interest forever. But leading on from that, you had the likes of Mortal Kombat with the like fatality moves and all that. That was the pioneering them kind of side-on, one-on-one fighting games. Which led to, to Tekken. That was, I think, the benchmark for that kind of stuff. Because it was just that side-on fighting one-on-one thing. But looked incredible. Great moves. And I think Tekken was slightly easier to pull off some spectacular moves without really knowing what the fuck you were doing with it, really. So, yeah, them side-on fighting ones that I really liked. Streets of Rage worth a mention as well. That was a classic Sega game. Streets of Rage 2 in particular. Again, great 8-bit soundtrack that is worthy of a mention. Along with Target Renegade that I mentioned before. And yeah, I think it was Double Dragon-esque in that kind of scrolling fighter game. But I think Streets of Rage 2 kind of mastered it and did it really well. It was the Yeah, I think it was the one that the likes of Double Dragon, the likes of Vigilante, the likes of Renegade and Target Renegade were leading up to the scrolling fighter game. And yeah, it mastered that really. And then there were other games like Greatest Heavyweights, interject image here, which was a boxing game that had a great career mode on it. And you could fight the greats, Floyd Patterson, Rocky Marciano, Muhammad Ali, Jack Dempsey, Evander Holyfield, various others. But yeah, the career mode was great. You could make this fighter from scratch and have like a proper career of like 50 plus fights if you wanted. Again, that was just side on and really sort of crude, like upper body, crudely sort of done, but great. And just, it was that career mode that kept you going. Jungle Strike, Desert Strike, other classic Sega games. Sonic the Hedgehog, of course, which was another one. And I think probably here, worth a mention that the Sega and early PlayStation were the last of the days, really, when it was all about that immersive one-player game. And I miss that. I really do miss that. I know that sounds like I'm a misanthrope and antisocial, which I am to a degree. But yeah, I mean, it's just this immersive, and it was all set up. The game was fully rendered for the one-person gaming experience. Yeah, you could do sports consoles, where, which I'll come on to shortly, that were more, geared to two-player and stuff like that. Nowadays, everything's geared towards online gaming, and I'm not really that fucking interested in online gaming, to be honest. I tell a lie in a sense. We have I'll get onto them later on, but me and a few mates back over in Morecambe have our Friday night GTA racing sessions, which I've not been to for the last few weeks, which I do miss, and they're great fun. We're all there with headsets on and, yeah, having our own sort of set-up races on Grand Theft Auto 5, which are ace, and I do enjoy that, but I don't like how everything, as all games now, are fixated on the online gaming experience, and I don't want to play fucking Gunter in Gelsenkirchen, or have some Mexican teenagers fucking swearing at me while I'm trying to do something, which happened, by the way, and I've still not got over it. But yeah, I want the one-player experience with the full story arc done properly and done in one game. Not so that you get half of it and then, hey, you can download the rest of it at extortionate amounts of fucking money every other month for the rest of forever. I want it done in one go. So I missed the one-player gaming, so I've digressed there ever so slightly. Back to the Sega games. And the game that came along and that changed console football games forever. FIFA. Now, the one I've got here is FIFA 96, where for me, they perfected it. I mean, obviously, they look incredible now. They look like you're playing real games, and there's no denying that, like, FIFA 22, 23, whatever we're on now, just look and play amazing. And I love these FIFA games. This one was my favourite one, because it was, you probably can't see it there, but it was that slightly elevated side-on look, and I love that angle, and I loved how it played. And this was the first one that introduced club sides. I think when it first come out, it was FIFA International Football, and it was just, you could just play like World Cups on it and stuff. Whereas this, they brought club sides into it, and it was ace. I absolutely adore this. I mean, I'm tempted to go out and buy a Mega Drive just to play this again, really, because it was fucking stunning. And I loved that FIFA, they're absolutely groundbreaking. They changed, because football games before that they'd all been that top-down thing, like Sensible Soccer and Super Kickoff, was it, and so on. And although they were good, and the editor functions were on them were great, they didn't play overly well, and it didn't feel like the real thing. This was the first on the way to feeling like the real thing. And FIFA were the kings for ages, right up until, I think it was like FIFA 2000 or 2001 or something like that, where a game came along. I've not got any of them, so I can't show them. And I don't know if I can be asked doing an image. Pro Evolution Soccer came along, and Pro Evolution Soccer 1, 2, 3, right the way through to 5, I would go so far as to say, were just incredible, stunning. And they had the editor function. You could edit your teams and player names and all that to look exactly how you wanted, which you can't do on FIFA, and it does annoy me, does that. Why just put an editor function on? Jesus Christ, it's not too hard. But yeah, they changed the landscape of the gaming world. yeah. And that's probably, and that Sega Mega Drive might be my favourite console. The games that I've got the fondest memories of, which I should go into, Mickey Mouse's Castle of Illusion. I've already covered this in some depth previously when I was talking about Type O Negative. Because I used to play that to death. I get stoned, play Mickey Mouse's Castle of Illusion, and basically listen to October Rust relentlessly. That was my life for months. And it was fantastic, as you can imagine. But yeah, I think the Mega Drive was my favourite console, even though I've spent more of my years on PlayStations in some way, shape or form. The Mega Drive was just had so many great games on it. That yeah, I'm now thinking that I might have to go out and buy one, reconditioned somewhere along the lines. Unless anyone knows of one that they're not using, then hit me up. But yeah, the PlayStation, and there were lots of great games on that. Grand Theft Auto started on that, but we'll get to that later on. But another game that changed everything for me, I've still got the original PS1 version, Resident Evil. This was just life-changing. I remember it was another band. We'd gone out of the bass players that I used to live out in the sticks somewhere out on the way to the Lake Districts. And we'd go there and rehearse. I say rehearse. We'd just generally go there and get hammered and end up playing on his PlayStation. And he introduced me to this. And it was just fantastic because it was creepy. It was frightening. It was like a zombie shooter, and it wasn't in the first person either. You had a character that you controlled. The dialogue is cheesy as fuck and continues to be so. And that is two Resident Evils. Hats off to them for doing that. That's part of the appeal. But there was puzzles in it as well. You had to sort of work out puzzles in order to get further on. And this was just groundbreaking. My favourite of them, and I don't have the original, was 2. This is the PlayStation 4 remaster that they did. Trying not to glare there with it. Resident Evil 2. This remaster's great, but it's not the original. Something about the original... Obviously, this looks miles better. But Resident Evil 2 is my favourite of the Resident Evil games. The original one, that is, I should say. Like I say, this is great, the remaster. But the original, the soundtrack, again, another great video game soundtrack. It just looks spectacular. And it took what Resident Evil, the first one, pioneered and just amplified it by 100. And yeah, still to me, it's the best game. It's the one that I immersed myself in. I remember clocking it once with no deaths and no saves. 3.5 hours, I think it took me, something like that. But I did it all in one go. Yeah, treasured memories. Then there was Resident Evil 3. I think Code Veronica came out. And then came this one, Resident Evil 4, with some of the most insanely cheesy dialogue you will ever find in a video game. Like with the little guy that's like the main evil bloke. Fantastic and absolutely enormous game. It goes, every time you think, oh, I must be coming close to the end here, you realise that you're about a third of the way through it. It just goes on and on. It is absolutely massive. And it took months of my life. And I have to say, the last great Resident Evil game. I've not played Village, which I've heard good stuff about. And I haven't played 7 Biohazards, I think it was called, which again, I'd heard good stuff about. But they went first person. It's like, no, I like having a character. I went right off it with first person. But like I say, I've heard great stuff about Village, so I might try it out. And Resident Evil 5 and 6, the less said about them, the better. They kind of took that puzzle element out of it, and it just became explosive shooters with annoyingly difficult fucking bosses at the end of every other level, and they ruined it. 5's alright, but Resident Evil 6 is absolute fucking garbage. So, yeah, if you've not played it, don't. Fucking dreadful game. Slight side arc to this. I found it when I was trying to dig out these old games. Manhunt. Great little game. Got banned eventually, I think. The second one certainly did. Gruesome as fuck. Great little game. But, yeah, sort of probably unnecessary levels of violence and clearly aimed at an older market, but slight nod there to Manhunt, yeah. Which then gets me into the sort of top 5. No, I tell a lie. Moving on from Manhunt, because again, I don't have it. I might insert image here. Silent Hill, another one, has to be worth mentioned. Genuinely terrifying at places, really creepy, and moved on from where Resident Evil left off. And again, brilliantly done. There's some honourable mentions to other games that I'll go into. But yeah, Silent Hill was another in that. And what made that early, I think that was still PlayStation 1, wasn't it? That early, the years of PlayStation, the formative years, and some fantastic games on there. But I'm going to get to the top 4 now, because we're into the nitty-gritty. And coming in at number 4, Vice City. The first of the great Grand Theft Auto games. Just immense game. I've got the soundtrack. I packed it away. I had it out in a previous video, but I've packed it away since because I can't have everything out. But this game, I was just absolutely dazzled by. I'd not got it. I'd not got a PlayStation 2, so I didn't know about it immediately. But it was a mate of mine that was like, just said, "You have to play that game. You'd love it." I knew Grand Theft Auto at the time from because I've not played 3 at that time either. Let me just dig it out for you. Not even played this one. This is the first one that came out on the PlayStation 2 generation of consoles. And this was groundbreaking. And it really was. And it still is groundbreaking. It was the first of these kind of immersive real world type thing. Before those games, these ones, Grand Theft Auto had been the top down, which were great. They had some really good elements to the gameplay and all that, and it just sort of like, I love the fact that you could just sort of like mount the pavement and charge over people, and it was the first one where you were a criminal in the game, and the soundtracks were really good, but they were all like homemade songs. Grand Theft Auto 3 is the first one that has actual sort of songs on it, but a very limited selection of radio channels. This one went up a gear, and it was set in 1986 and has the greatest 80s soundtrack ever. It looks spectacular. You can't really get an idea of it, but it looked great with the sunsets and all that, and set in a fictional Vice City that's Miami like. But together with the missions, the look, the comedy in jokes and like nods to 80s pop culture, the stupidity of some of the levels of violence and stuff you got up to in the missions, and the soundtrack, which took you right back to the 80s. So it was a pure nostalgia trip for me. And I loved it, and I still do. I've got the definitive editions. I downloaded them, though, so I don't have the box. But I've got the definitive editions of this trilogy, 3, Vice City and San Andreas, on the PlayStation 4. And I still go back to them now. I'm sort of halfway through Vice City. I need to pick it up again. But I'm playing something else at the moment, which you'll see shortly. And the one that I'm getting back into at the minute, now I've only got the download of the first game, The Last of Us. This is part 2. I've got part 1 downloaded, and these are just incredible. If you haven't played these, you've got to straight away. They're both fabulous. I think this second one looks slightly better. The storyline's better in the first one, but some of the gameplay and the look is slightly better in this second one. But there's no in it. They are both absolutely spectacular games. And I can't speak about them highly enough. I can't wait there's a series coming next year on Sky. I think it's like January 15th or something it's on. Something like that, with the guy from Mandalorian is playing Joel in this. And if it's a third as good as the games, it's going to be great. I can't wait for it. But these games I think when I bought the PS4, I got the first one as a free download with it. So it's like, right, well, I've heard quite good stuff about this. I'll give it a go. Absolutely hooked straight away. It's terrifying at times, and you've got to use a game I should make a nod to, Metal Gear Solid. There's lots of that stealth. Metal Gear Solid brought in that stealth that you have to do. And yeah, lots of nods to that. So just spectacular. You've got to play these games. They're stunning. Number 2, very close second, Red Dead Redemption, and 2 in particular. The first one is groundbreaking and a spectacular game, but this second one is just enormous. It's just an insanely good game. The real world, is absolutely massive. Looks incredible. Mountains, swamps, deserts. It's got it all in there. Snowy tundras and blah blah and all that nonsense. Everything about it is absolutely stunning. The game is immense. But just wandering about on your horse in it is great. And a lot of the side missions, I tried to 100% this and got to like 98.9. And I kind of gave up because I just found the 100% on this got a little tedious. I know that sounds ridiculous that I got so close, but there was one where you had to like tomahawk someone from fucking 80 foot, but there was no way of measuring what 80 foot was. And anyway, so without doing that, I couldn't get 100% and I gave up on it in the end. But some of the side missions, like the loads of creepy side stories in this with like cannibals in it and ghosts. There's a particular great little side mission that I don't know if any of you've all discovered it as such, but it terrified me, and you've got to keep going back different nights to go and see more. There's a ghost of a woman in the swamp. It's not part of the 100%. You've just got to, it's just part of this. I remember you're in the swamp at night and you could hear this distant voice, like, what's that? And then all of a sudden you see like a ghost in the distance. Spectacular. The level of detail, absolutely stunning. And this is one of the greatest games of all time, Red Dead Redemption 2. But on to number one, and my favourite game ever, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. The reason that Green Sabre is called Green Sabre, I don't think there's a picture of the Green Sabre on this, but yeah, it just, the greatest game of all time for me. Yeah, there's games that look better, there's games that probably play better, there's games with better story missions, and sort of like Red Dead Redemption 2, that ticks all those boxes. But this had everything. The soundtrack, again, Red Dead Redemption 2 soundtrack's very good. The soundtrack to this, set in 1992 era, so you've got all that classic early 90s rock, metal soundtrack, you've got the hip-hop soundtrack at the time, you've got what was big pop-wise at the time, but there's a couple of throwback stations on there as well that play like The Who, Creedence, who else you got, Tom Petty, and yeah, just loads of really good throwback stuff on there. An insane amount of missions, really funny at times. It was when Grand Theft Auto still was daft and crazy and had all these weird sort of like little side stories going on. Grand Theft Auto 4 onwards started just slightly taking itself a little too seriously, and it lost a bit of that fun, daft element from it. I think that was deliberate, to be fair. And Grand Theft Auto, again, 4 was another one that looked stunning. And 5 as well, a little shout out to 5, of course. What the games have moved on to become. Absolutely spectacular game. But not this one. I have 100%ed this game 5 times now in total. All the missions, all the side stuff, the oysters, the fucking horseshoes, the photo opportunities, the gang tags where you've got to spray paint stuff. And yeah, I know that sounds sad. And also, speaking of sad, that Tracy never lets me live down. When this came out in like 2004, was it? 2004, yeah. I was working in the Reebok factory at Lancaster at the time. And when this came out, I pre-ordered it with like the guidebook and stuff. I took a week off work. I took a week's holiday to immerse myself in this and get right far into it. And Tracy still reminds me now, saying, I cannot believe that time that you took 5 days leave from work to play. Yeah, and I don't regret it at all. Treasured memory and something to tell the grandkids. But this game is everything to me. As I've said on probably 2 or 3 videos now, this is the finest video game of all time and holds the most nostalgia for me, the best memories. And even just talking about it now makes me want to go and put it back on and try and go for 100% again on it. I did 100%, I think it was last year at some point. Did it again. Yeah, 5 times. Beat that, kids. Yeah, so that's kind of it. We're nearly at 35 minutes. This is in danger, which I knew it would be because there was a lot to get through here. In danger of getting, but just a few shout outs too, because although I've talked about mine, I've mentioned Bry a few times. I remember going to Gaz's younger when we was in Desolate and we used to play. I introduced him to the FIFA game on that and he was hooked from them, the international football one. But we used to go around to Gaz's and he'd play Football Manager and he'd have his, Gaz is a Liverpool fan, so he'd have his Liverpool manager career going in there. I'd always tell him to get a Leeds United manager career in there just to sort of throw a spanner in the works, but he was having none of it. But yeah, in fact, I've got one memory of one time going out of Gaz's. We've been playing a bit of FIFA, then he played a bit of Football Manager. It's the Commodore or whatever he had at the time. And then I remember I did an interview. There used to be a fanzine ages ago. I did an interview for Desolate, or it might have even made my first thrash band, Decry, for a fanzine called We've All Got HIV, I think it was called. I was trying to get... Gaz reckons it was a guy called Dave the Bastard who we used to knock about. We used to see all the time at gigs in Bradford and stuff like that. He was a great guy, was Dave. I don't know what happened to him. He kind of dropped off the radar. So Dave the Bastard, if you're watching, that wasn't my nickname for you. That's just what I was told you were called. So no offence if you don't like being called the Bastard, or just Dave, whatever your parlance. But used to bump into Dave all the time, and he had this fanzine going, and I'll never forget. I've still got it upstairs. Again, that was another thing that I was looking for, and I couldn't dig it out because it must be in a very safe place, which I'll never find again. But I did an interview for him for one of the bands. He reviewed the Decry tape. It was called Rites of Passage, and he likened it to Carcass's Heartwork, which was, Jesus, that's esteemed company. It wasn't anywhere near as good as that, like, but yeah, he likened it to that. But I remember my interview was the page before. He'd done like a double-page interview spread with Danny from Cradle of Filth. And I don't think Cradle of Filth was signed at the time. Or they were about to be. One or the other anyway. But, I will try and find that at some point. I've got to go through it, Loft, and clear out a lot of shite anyway. So I will try and find that at some point and go through it. But I'd like to dig that out and see who else is in that fanzine. So, yeah, shout out to Dave the Bastard. Shout out to Redbeard Viking. That was the guy that was trying to remember last time. Top fella that I met through doing this kind of nonsense, really. So I have to try and meet up with you next time at Damnation as well. We both did Damnation reviews. And that is that. That's enough of this nonsense now. Probably the longest episode, but one that I needed to get off my chest. Moving forward, obviously, this is the band's YouTube channel, so I can't keep doing all these sort of tenuous links, but I'm going to keep doing them every now and then. Just not as regularly. I'm just getting a few out of the way to get our feet under the table as such, if you will. And get some subscribers in. I did have 41. One of you left. Who? Actually, we won't know because you're probably not watching this because you don't subscribe anymore. You bastard. But anyway, I'm not bitter about it. But, you know, if you're going to subscribe, don't then leave. You're missing all this juicy content with notes and games and additional imagery that will pop up every now and then. So that's that, yeah. Right. The next video, I'll be able to give you a full rundown of our gig that'll have happened by the time the next video lands. So, yeah, watch this space. But until then, adieu. And keep it real. Stay focused. Like and subscribe. See you later, guys.